Hi, beautiful souls, and welcome back to this astrology, human design, and Gene Keys channel with me today, Tan. And today we're going to be diving into Gene Key 24 or Human Design Gate 24, which is the zodiac sign of Taurus. So if you are new to the Gene Keys, you can also watch an introduction video that I've made about what is the Gene Keys, how to read your profile. I'll provide a link to that up above and in the description box below as well. And you can kind of come back and watch this video after you have an understanding of the Gene Keys from those intro videos. And yes, if you are interested in getting a reading, then head over to my website, tanastrology.com, where me and my sister Soul Tribe team will be happy to do a reading for you and be your guides on your self-discovery journeys. All right, so let's get started. And as usual, we're going to begin by doing a quick overview of the Gene Key. Gene Key 24. So Gene Key 24 goes from 737 degrees of Taurus to 1315 degrees of Taurus. And it moves from the shadow of addiction to the gift of invention to the siddhi of silence. Silence, the ultimate addiction. In the dream arc Totem, the fear key underworld creature is the flying fish, the life key animal is the hare, and the vision key bird for today is the Nightjar, this mysterious bird. In the codon ring, this gene key is part of the ring of life and death, and it's associated with the amino acid leucine. In the 64 I-CHING hexagram, this hexagram is called turning point. It is earth over thunder. New life springs forward from the depths, receiving awakening from within. The programming partner of this Gene Key is Gene Key 44, and that is, of course, Scorpio archetype because that is at the opposite point of the zodiac wheel. So I highly recommend that you also check out the video on Gene Key 44 as well to get a more comprehensive understanding of the balancing energies of Gene Key 24. And in human design, this gate 24 is located in the ajna, and it's connected to gate 61 in the crown via a channel called the channel of awareness or contemplation. It moves from the shadow of blankness to a gift of contemplation to the siddhi of mystery. All right, what an exciting gene key we're going to be looking at today, all you Taurians out there. So of course, as usual, we're going to begin analyzing this gene key by seeing its association with nature. And when it comes to the birds, that's going to be the nightjar bird. So the nightjar is a bird that is a nocturnal hunter. And there are so many symbolisms in different cultures for the nightjar. So in Native America, its song is a symbol of the cyclical nature of life. In Eastern cultures, the nightjar is associated with the supernatural and the unknown. In Celtic traditions, the nightjar is associated with being able to see opportunities in unlikely situations and reverential acceptance of life's changes. And I'd like to read a quote for you guys from antiflow.com about the symbolism of the nightjar, which I thought was a beautiful poetic paragraph. It is written that the nightjar is a very odd character, jarring, and has an irritating cry that cannot fail to get to the ear of all people, even if they were not keen on what is going on out there. The bird has the ability to break all the silence that is attached to the peace of the nights, especially in the forest or bushes. The bird does not seem like a bird, but does look like a pallet which is falling on the cogs of a working wheel which is rotating steadily. The sound may begin early in the evening and last for the entire night. That is the essence of the nightjar for you guys right there. Now, scientifically speaking, the nightjar has this enormous gape, which happens due to its ability to open its mouth vertically and horizontally. And this is a very noticeable feature of the nightjar. And the reason why it does this is that it catches insects in flight whole. And its main food source are moths and beetles. So there are a lot of other very interesting characteristics of the nightjar, and if you guys are interested in this bird and the association with Gene Key 24, then I highly recommend that you do a bit of research there because there's a lot of interesting things. Now, of course, what are going to be some of your characteristics if you have this gene key in your profile? And I want to start here by recalling the person who introduced me to the gene keys in the first place, because this was a woman and a client of mine who had her son in Gene Key 24. And she was the one that actually introduced me to the Gene Keys and got me really going on this journey. And it was really interesting because in my chart, I also have Gene Key 24 as my vocation sphere in the Gene Keys profile. So, which is a sphere that's part of your Pearl and also part of your Venus sequence. So this is going to be an interesting one. And what I've noticed with people who have Gene Key 24, and something I've noticed in myself with this one, is that there's this characteristic within you where you are thinking about something and you like to think about something over and over and over again. If there's a topic that appears to be mysterious, or you can't quite find the answers to those topics very easily, you will be somebody who will think about it over, and you will think about it from all sides, all perspective. You are a researcher and you're going to research that topic over and over and over again. After all, in the I-CHING called the returning. So your mind is just kind of going around like that wheel. But of course, at some point, you can also have some addictions there, and that is an addiction to thinking. Most of the times, there can also be other addictions that you may have as well. I also feel like there's a lot of famous female celebrities that have this particular gene key as their sun, and they are very addictive to others. Like, people just kind of get obsessed with if it's a sun, then it's, of course, your physical appearance and your sort of your vitality and your energy. And people just kind of get addicted to that. Like Jessica Alba has her sun in Gene Key 24, for example. This is also the gene key that's very creative by nature and is seeking to invent something original. But of course, that's a process in itself. And if you know that you're here to create something that's very original, that's very inventive, it might take some time, of course, for you to get to that place, because you have to kind of research and think about something over and over again for a period of time first. But yes, let's dive into the shadow of Gene Key 24 and what does it mean when you're in the shadow of addiction. But beautiful souls, before we move on, I want to make a quick announcement that we are now offering membership opportunities for you guys if you're interested in learning more about the gene keys, astrology, or human design, and not just learning from the mind, but actually embodying these particular parts of your charts. So head over to our website, hyphensoul.com. In the memberships portal, you'll see that we're offering this beautiful, amazing, exclusive opportunity for you to become a part of our cosmic tribe. As a part of a member of our cosmic tribe, not only will you be engaging more with your charts, you will also be transforming, embodying all of these different parts of your charts. And you're going to be facilitated by me and my soul tribe sisters, Sarah and Cindy as well. You will also see that we have upcoming events every month. We meet about 4 times a month. These events are masterclasses and workshops that if you are a member, depending on your membership package, you can come to these memberships, workshops and masterclasses for free of charge. And these are very transformative types of masterclasses and workshops. So I highly recommend that you do check out our membership packages. They are absolutely amazing. We'd love to have you join the tribe and join this beautiful movement of soulful connection and transformation together as a collective as we progress together into the future, into the age of Aquarius, we can even say. I like the way that Richard Rudd describes addiction here, because he says that, first of all, addiction, or the shadow of this gene key, is what keeps the psychology business in profession. And it's also what keeps big advertising companies in profession and in business. So this particular gene key, because it is in the ajna, there is something quite mental about it. And when we look at, and Richard Rudd also describes this, he gives this metaphor of a piano as being your brain. And if you can imagine, there are 88 keys on a piano. What happens when you're in the shadow of addiction is that you keep playing the same notes over and over again. So maybe there's 5 notes that you play on the piano and you keep playing it over and over again, which is kind of like the circuitry of the brain. When you're in the shadow of addiction, there's a particular part of the brain that gets triggered and it goes around and around. It gets triggered again and again. And this happens because, we find tunes that we're comfortable with. We find tunes in our brain that, we're comfortable with, and it's a part of our habit, and we play them over and over again, and we don't break out of those types of habitual patterns. And some people who are in the shadow of addiction will follow these patterns their whole lives. Of course, everyone uses their brain all the time. And of course, this is probably something that happens to all of us, that we just have this part of our brain that we're comfortable with using, and we just use it over and over again. But, it's very hard to find somebody who is able to break away from that and experiences a new way of thinking, which of course, the new way of thinking is the gift of invention. The shadow of addiction is just a repetitive way of thinking. And of course, what we see happening externally with people who are in the shadow of addiction is that they will follow a particular path or a course of life that is just always the same. So you may noticing them having the same jobs for 10, 20, 30 years, but they just kind of struggle in that job, but they're still in it. Or they're in a relationship that they've been in for 10 years and they're not like fulfilled, but they're still in it. Or maybe they go, they have new relationships in their lives, but every relationship that they find themselves in has a repetitive pattern, has the same lessons, is going through that same pattern. So the beautiful thing about addiction, however, is that every cycle of addiction has what is called a gap to it. So every time that you begin to play those notes on the piano, there will be gaps, right? There will be time when it ends, the cycle ends. Maybe the song ends. But what happens when you're in the shadow of addiction is when that cycle ends, you play it again and you play it again, and you don't allow time to stop and take a break between those cycles. You don't allow the gap to happen. Because when that gap appears, a lot of the times it is felt as emptiness, and that makes one deeply uncomfortable. So we will avoid these gaps by numbing ourselves with things or distracting ourselves with things outside of ourselves. So the shadow of addiction, when you are in this shadow, you never change, to simply put. You never change. You never reach, we can say, a paradigm shift in your life, in your way of thinking. And we can look at this further as to why does this cycle keep happening by looking at the different bodies that we have here. So there's this idea, of course, that we are not just our physical body, but we have many layers of our bodies. And if we look at the 3 lower bodies, that's the physical body, the astral body, and the mental body. These are the 3 of them that, when it's not working correctly in relationship to each other, keeps you in that cycle of addiction. So what happens is that everybody in this world, we were a soul, right? And so we came into this world, into this physical body, sort of fragmented, we can say. And so we all carry a particular sacred wound. There are 6 sacred wounds, and you will have one of these wounds more than others. I also talked a little bit more about these wounds in my Gene Key 22 video, so I highly recommend that you check that out as well to get a sense of what these sacred wounds are. But they are repression, denial, shame, rejection, guilt, and separation. So one of them is going to impact you a lot more than others. And you can also figure this out by looking at the sphere in your profile, which is your core wound / vocation sphere. It will tell you which of these is strongest for you. And yeah, just check out my Gene Key 22 video. I explain all about that there. But so what happens is when this sacred wound in the physical body, right? Because you've come to this physical vehicle, when this sacred wound in the physical body is somehow triggered, like let's say your sacred wound is shame, right? And somehow something happens in your life and shame is triggered. What happens then is that the astral body will kick in, and the astral body is also our emotional body. And then the astral body will try to escape this wound in the physical body that's happening by giving you a particular desire to escape. So that's what happens to our emotions. We have this escapist emotional pattern that's coming up, and then the mental body kicks in, and the mental body starts mentally looking for things to do. And sometimes this is like falling into propaganda or advertisement, and then tells and then gets the astral body and the physical body to do those things. So let me give you an easy example of how this might work. Let's say that Your sacred wound is rejection, right? And this is very easy and very simple. You were rejected by a love interest of your choice. So this is rooted in your physical body. Then the astral body says, this is painful, this rejection, it really hurts. So I have to do something to escape from this pain. So the mental body says, well, then what I could do, and this, I've seen a lot of people doing this, and I also saw this, in many movies, and my friends are doing this, is to find a new love interest. So let's do that. So you go and you find a new love interest. This is how addiction works. So you find a new love interest so that you would not be rejected again, but then you end up falling into the same kinds of scenarios where maybe you are rejected again, or something just happens that it's the same lesson over and over again because you cannot change your inner addiction that is coming from your mind and its association with the astral body and the physical body, which is inside of yourself, via something outside of yourself. You cannot change an addiction that is rooted inside of yourself via something outside of yourself, something external. This is really important for Gene Key 24 is to understand that that's what's happening with addiction. We're trying to cope with something that is going on inside of ourselves via external things, distractions, things that can numb us. As Richard Rudd says here, nothing external can bring an end to your suffering, since it is rooted deep within your DNA. So, and I also found this to be a very interesting concept because spirituality can also be an addiction. Astrology can be an addiction. The gene keys and human design can be an addiction. And I've experienced this a lot. I mean, in myself, of course, but also with clients. And I found that the moment that I, you can say, turned my addiction to astrology into something more inventive, that's also when I draw clients to myself who are no longer so addicted to astrology. Because when I was first doing readings for clients, I was still in that stage of my life where I would, whenever there's a problem, something happening inside of me, I'd be like, okay, what is the astrological answer to this? And somehow that boosts my ego, you know what I mean? And so I would also draw clients into my life who were very addicted to astrology. Like they would, send me a message and say, I want to know if this person is in love with me. Use astrology to help me see if this person is in love with me. Like that is addiction. These are mysteries of life. These are things that are outside of yourself that you're trying to get answers for. Obviously, at some point, we can use astrology and all of these spiritual systems. And instead of using it to end our suffering, we can use it to do something creative and use it as inspiration and for the purpose of joy rather than to end our suffering. And I think that is when the addiction can slowly become something inventive in the gift frequency. And the moment that I began to realize this, I was then drawing clients to myself who were not so obsessive with astrology or human design or the gene keys anymore. They were just kind of like, yeah, I'm just curious. I'm just curious, and I enjoy being curious about my chart, and I want you to tell me, Tan, just tell me something, and I'm just curious to know. It's that kind of a surrendering energy, and I find that to be very beautiful, as opposed to the former type of way of using spirituality, astrology, or human design and gene keys. So the last thing I want to mention here about addiction is that it can be described to mice or hamsters that are on a spinning wheel. They're just on the wheel. They want to stop, however. They're tired, but they don't actually stop because it becomes this habit, right? But they could. All they have to do is stop running. So all you have to do to end addiction is to allow the gaps between these habits, these cyclic habits, to happen and to exist. So there's a repressive and a reactive version of addiction, and you will experience both of them in your life if you have this back and forth. The repressive version of addiction is called frozen. So this is when you come across that gap in your awareness that we're talking about. I'm going to use the word gap a lot here. When you come across that gap, you begin to freeze up and you experience a complete lack of energy there, almost kind of like depression. And mentally speaking, you can become a little bit narrow-minded in your perception of things. and a little bit guarded in your perception as well. So what this means is that when you are experiencing that emptiness or that gap in your thinking, in your thoughts, in those habits of your thoughts, you shrink. You almost like shrink. And this repressive version of addiction can be associated with feeling numb or using substances to numb yourself, like alcoholics would be considered an addiction in the case of the repressive frozen nature. In the reactive nature, we have anxiousness or anxiety. So this is when you experience that gap, and instead of freezing up, you become panic and you become anxious, and you immediately need to resort to external things to fill that gap. You fall into being crazy about activity, needing to do this and do that, and you prevent the magic that could have occurred in the gap from happening. This type of reactive shadow is what is associated with people who become workaholics or are addicted to gambling. So how can we turn addiction into invention? And I feel like I might have already mentioned that or talked a little bit about that as well. And of course, the first step to turn your addiction into invention is, of course, to allow the gap to exist. How you respond to these gaps become your reality and determines whether you will fall into another level of awareness or simply fall back into your familiar ways and comfortable ways of thinking and being. When you're in the gift of awareness, the gift of invention can also be called the gift of awareness, you don't find these gaps to be frightening anymore. You become a little bit of a genius when you're in the inventive gift of it. When you're in the gift of inventiveness, you are able to make quantum leaps. And Richard Rudd here describes the difference between a good player and a great tennis player. And he says that the great tennis player follows no set patterns that their opponent can break down, counteract, and defeat. They will throw in shots that are totally unexpected and come at the most intense moments. So, to be able to bring the unexpected into something that everybody else has always been doing in this comfortable, familiar way is invention, is genius. That is the difference between a good and a great anything. Good artist, great artist. Good doctor, great doctor. Good engineer, great engineer. The one who is the great one, we can say in this case, is the one that makes quantum leaps in that particular field by bringing in the unexpected to it. There's a lot of originality and there's a lot of surprise in the people who are embodying in you if you're embodying the gift of inventiveness. And immediately I thought of this Instagrammer. I think she goes by the name Guairoche. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, but I can also provide a link to her Instagram in the description box below as well, because she feels, I don't know if she has Gene Key 24, but I kind of feel like she does, because she's a singer. She's an artist, singer, and of course she's also a very spiritual person, but everything she does there is very surprising and she puts an original spin on everything that she does. So I highly recommend that you check out that energy there. So when you think about your brain, it can be divided into what is called gray matter and white matter. So gray matter is used for processing information in the brain. What happens with gray matter when you're traveling from addiction to inventiveness is that first you travel a familiar neurological pathway in your brain. That's how we process information. And then eventually you arrive at one of those magical gaps. This happens to all of us, right? But of course, you have Gene Key 24, your brain is just firing on. So this is just happening a lot more. And so eventually, as you process more and more information, you will arrive at one of those magical gaps where the processing stops. The moment you hit the gap, you begin to change neurological gear. And suddenly, a new and more efficient synapses opens up in your brain. And you begin to be able to see things in a totally new light. Kind of like the great tennis player or the great whatever, they are repetitive at first. At first, they are just the good tennis player. They're kind of doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. But at some point, they allow the gaps to happen and then they branch off into something new. Kind of like why an inventor can invent something new. They have to at first study that thing that they're inventing very thoroughly first, right? If you want to invent a new I don't know, shower head. First, you have to study how shower heads work and you have to think about it over and over again. But at some point, you're able to stop the thinking. And then there's almost like this light bulb that just clicks in your head. And you're just kind of like, oh, well, this is what we can do to make shower heads much more efficient and better. The gift of inventiveness also loves to contemplate on the mysteries of life and death, on the nature of things, and understands that suffering can lead you to that heightened state of awareness. So you don't try to escape the suffering. And of course, if you look at the human design body graph, you will see that gene key 24 is, of course, connected to gate 61. So the 61, 24, and then right down the middle of that body graph, the next gate below that, we have the 43, and then we have the 23. So these gates are all connected to each other, which means that gate 24 is responsible for that contemplation, that pondering process that allows you to get into heightened states of awareness. And then a deep insight drops into gate 43. After that insight drops, then gate 23 now tries to translate or communicate and express these new insights that have come through via the throat center. So the gift of inventiveness is what is also at the heart of the creative process of human beings. And it is one of the secrets to creativity itself. And the difference between addiction and creativity or inventiveness is that addiction, of course, as we already know, it goes around in a circle. But invention and creativity, it still goes around, but it is a spiral. So every time you go around again, so every time you're coming back and you hit that gap and you allow the gap to exist, you kind of move up the energy octave or frequency, and you hit another gap, and then you allow it to happen and you spiral instead of going around in the circle. And one of the key things to consider to, go into that spiral is that sometimes you have to realize also that some things you just don't know and you may never know. That's when you begin to go into inventiveness, because if there's some searching for the answer to certain mysteries, we will go in that spiral, that circle again and again, because there is no answer. And to accept that sometimes there's just no answer for this particular situation, that will allow you accepting of that, like, I just don't know, to go up that spiral and turn it into inventiveness instead of the search or the seeking of the answer of something. So if you are in the gift of inventiveness, it's going to be important that for you, there's a period in your day where you do have silence, where you're not even listening to music, you're not reading anything, you're not talking to anyone, you're not watching anything, and you are just in silence. So let's look at the siddhi of silence now, since we are getting there. What does it really mean, the siddhi of silence? So Richard Rudd describes silence as only being possible when thinking disappears altogether. And temporary quietness is, of course, not the same as silence, but it could be the path to silence. The silence will be something that descends on you, although it already lives inside of you. And silence can really happen when your awareness moves from your head, your mind, to your solar plexus. Certain chemicals in your body will begin to change. And this is really poetic, but Richard Rudd describes this as you no longer think, but instead you are thought by life. There is knowing and not knowing going on simultaneously rather than thinking. And ultimately, the addiction that you are separate from life is finally gone forever. So this siddhi of silence, we have to look a little bit at the concept of reincarnation. And this is also an important concept when we look at the programming partner, which is gene key 44 as well. But the I-CHING hexagram calls this hexagram the returning. And a part of why it's called returning is because of reincarnation. So here we're talking about dying and then coming back into form, then dying, coming back into form. And that at a level of consciousness and at the highest possible level is addiction to form in itself. That's reincarnation. And until this addiction is broken once and for all, humanity can never really be free. We're always going to be sort of stuck in this form. That's not to say it is good or bad. That is just part of the cycle of evolution and part of the learning process of addiction. So once our connection to this material form is finally raptured, the soul can then actually become enlightened and returns to the ocean of being, we can say. And of course, we probably already know this, that the body doesn't last forever. The body is born and then it dies and it goes back into the earth. But consciousness is something that can last beyond the physical body. The consciousness beneath the body still continues to live and to exist. And that pure consciousness is silence in itself. It is undying, it is silent, it is intangible, and it is beyond form. So when you remember a past life or you get a reading done for your past life, there's something there about remembering what is called your fractal line. The fractal line is contained within your blood. It is the consciousness that has come into form and that it is part of your DNA and part of your blood. And of course, you can watch my video on Gene Key 44 to get more of a deep understanding of the fractal lines and what it is and why it's important. One last message for those with Gene Key 24. As you are listening to this, of course, you're probably thinking a lot and there's a lot going on in your mind. But the last message for you guys would be to relax. Just relax. Remember to relax. Because only when you do that will the magic of those gaps manifest in the world and allow you to experience the truth of something directly, not through your mind, but through your innermost being. So that is going to be the transmission of Gene Key 24. If you guys have this Gene Key, feel free to comment below and share your experiences. And if you like this video, then give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. If you already subscribed, then thank you, beautiful souls, for coming along on these magical journeys. And if you like the content that I put out and the effort that I put into my videos, you can also give me a super thanks. I would also really appreciate that. That's also in the tabs below. And as usual, and if you're interested in getting a reading, then of course, head over to my website, tanastrology.com as well. And that's it for today, beautiful souls. I'll see you soon.